Welcome to Story in a Bottle. I'm your host, Dan McElroy. Each episode, our guests are leading voices in tech, media, and entertainment. And to get to know them better, we share their favorite cocktails as they share their stories.
The line between journalism and comedy has become thinner and thinner over the past few decades. And one of the people at the forefront of that has been Roy Wood Jr. Over Allagash White Ales, Roy talks about his early drive for a career in journalism, but how the comedy bug grabbed him. His early startup success, how ESPN allowed him to combine a love of comedy and sports, as well as being a part of the cultural zeitgeist while on The Daily Show.
Cheers.
Cheers to you.
Here's to you. Thanks for coming over.
Absolutely.
And we're drinking beer at 3:30 in the afternoon on what is today, Wednesday?
Just one.
Just one.
Just one.
There might be a second one coming. I don't know. We'll see.
You do the second one. I'm not. I got shit to do today, and I'm not gonna be sleepy. Alcohol slows me down.
I think it slows a lot of people down.
Yeah, I'll drink to be jovial with friends, but it's got to be like, all right, this is the last activity of the day, right? And it's like, yes, it is. And then that's when
You're committed at that point. This is not a committed drinking
the idea
situation.
of day drinking is such a foreign concept to me. There's no way I would.
Yeah.
I couldn't.
We used to record these at like 7 at night. Made it a lot easier.
Yeah.
During the day, it's not as...
you need to start doing brunch podcasts.
We just drink some mimosas.
Something
totally.
like that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming down and having a Allagash. Why Allagash? I know you didn't expect to drink, so.
No, I asked for a Blue Moon. I just like something lighter and like an easier this. I'm like beer. I'm very picky about anyway. I'm really more of a whiskey and Scotch guy, but that's not a 3:30.
But I want to talk about. We're here to talk about you, not about me.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of the best place to start. Actually, first thing we want to hear is I know you left the Daily Show last year.
Yeah.
What was like? Were you thinking about leaving anyways, or was there anything like that kind of spurned that?
No, it was looking at after the strike, this landscape is changing. I don't know what the Daily Show is going to be, and I don't know if I'll fit into that. So let me go and figure out other things just in case.
Yeah.
And trying to leave the door open, if they want to come back and host, cool. But the idea of trying to be a correspondent while also simultaneously trying to figure out what's next for me, I just didn't think it was fair to the position of correspondent to try and do those two things at the same time. So I just stepped away.
Pretty reasonable. I mean, it seemed like a weird situation for anyone on the staff. Not a bad situation, it's a weird situation that with a different person coming in every week. What was that? Was that a challenging experience as a writer? And
I mean, as a correspondent, it's different because I'm just there to work in service of the host. But I imagine the writers had, a challenge of basically creating a different offense every week. But they won an Emmy. So for whatever they were doing, that's why I think it was so dope that the show got an Emmy because, for a greater part of that time after Trevor's departure, you're essentially creatively trying to create something that honors the original vision of the show, which goes through one host. But now every week you're doing it with multiple hosts.
Yeah.
One host's sensibilities may not be the same as the next. What's the joke that host feels comfortable doing that also is in alignment with the show itself as a whole too? So yeah, I mean, I wasn't in a lot of the writer's wing stuff on the week to week, but I would imagine that is definitely a challenging thing to have to do.
It didn't impact your work as a correspondent because you're kind of doing your own stuff. Is that how that works?
A little bit, but as a correspondent, your job is to be a chameleon.
Mm-hmm.
Like this week, this is the joke and the angle that we're trying to show is this to expose the satirical side of the hypocrisy is this that we're trying to expose. So as a correspondent in studio, it's a little bit of change here and there, but the actual job of going out and covering a story did not change at all.
Right.
Doesn't matter who the host is. When I'm out of town covering Cop City in Atlanta, it's me and my interview subject. Like there's nothing else to be,
It's a piece that's going to be part of that show no matter what. So,
correct.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the job of the correspondent is something that to a degree is a little bit evergreen and that I hate to use chameleon again, but you're able to fit in a lot of what we do around whomever is host. But that first 10 minutes of the show, that's where the things become the most different and unique.
Well, I think that with your work on the Daily Show and another work I've seen you do, one of the things that's very clear is that you have a very intelligent mind around politics and around kind of what's going on right now. And I'm curious as to how that impacted your experience hosting the White House Correspondents' Dinner, also last year.
The Correspondence Dinner was a little different from Daily Show because I get to call out stuff, but I also get to make jokes that I normally wouldn't make on the Daily Show. Just
Yeah.
the tone of the joke, like
It's more of a roast in a lot of ways, or
a little bit, but to me, it was more of a political, like a roasting of ideas and the occupation of politician and the occupation of journalists
yeah.
instead of going after specific people.
Mm.
Like that was never the MO, but to be able to have a joke where you can tell, like within the correspondence set, I think I made a joke about Cardi B and Clarence Thomas, also Vanderpump Rules, George Santos. I joked about like a legit joke about school shootings.
Yeah, that's a hard one to do.
The way, but that works in that form, and it worked that night. But if you do that same joke on the Daily Show, there has to be a different angle because I also believe the venues in which we receive information dictate how we perceive it.
Mm-hmm.
The Correspondence Dinner is almost understood that I could be a little rude because traditionally that's what that gig is.
Yeah.
Daily Show's a little more buttoned up. It's a little more. So it's like, ooh, why would you make that joke in this particular form? So no, you want to have an opinion about stuff, and I guess that's where the two gigs are similar. But with the Correspondence Dinner, I say the biggest difference is being able to be a little bit more extreme and a little bit even more absurdist in the punchlines that you use to get to the point you're trying to make.
And over the past few years, I feel like maybe that past decade, that Correspondence Dinner has certainly kind of through some ups and downs, and it's how it's been perceived. And so when you kind of get the task of hosting it, or how it's been received, maybe not perceived.
Yeah.
When you get the task of hosting it, what is your thought? I mean, it seems like an honor, but obviously, but what is your thought process going into it?
Terrific.
Yeah,
it's horrifying. But also, yes, I will do it like that because you're getting a chance to talk to elected officials. So why not go at them a little bit? Why not go at them just a little bit? But also, how far to go? What topics? How are you going to do it? But the idea of whether or not I should or shouldn't do it was never up for question.
Were there questions in your head as to how far to go?
Yeah, but that's relative though. What's too far?
That's a question every comedian, I'm sure, asks themselves or ask each other.
They shouldn't be asking themselves. They should ask what they think is funny.
Yeah.
And if somebody thinks it's too far, great. Don't come see me anymore.
Yeah.
Vote with your wallet. It's okay. How hard to go was there was some conversation around that, but we didn't necessarily live. We didn't necessarily live in that fear. But, ideally, it was just about figuring out what are the best ways to convey the point we're trying to make. And if that's talking about the topic versus talking about the person, that's kind of where we kind of went back and forth. But, these are the jokes, man. And if y'all are going to be mad, that's fine. I got a hunch that my career will be okay either way.
Yeah.
Unless I go up there and punch Biden.
Which would be a problem, yeah.
Frowned upon.
Yeah, they wouldn't like that.
I don't know what I could do that people would just go, wow, I really hate you forever. Versus, hey, it wasn't funny that night. I don't think he's funny.
Right.
So, I don't know. You want to do a good job, so you're definitely measuring the jump of how to succeed. But the idea on whether or not I should jump, no, you have to do that. It's a once in a lifetime. 25 people have done it, I think.
Is that right? Only 20? Is that right?
Give or take.
Oh, wow.
It's not
that
a
I did
lot.
not know. Yeah.
It's not a lot.
And that is definitely something you got to jump at. You don't say no to that.
So, yeah, just to be on that list. Yeah, I'll take that.
So it seems to me that in doing a little bit, the little bit of research I did on your background, or a lot of research, whatever you want to call it, the idea of speaking your voice and kind of being straightforward, I feel like that's like in your blood, you know, from your parents to your childhood. And I'm really curious to hear like how, as you were growing up, you know, I know you were born in New York and you went to Alabama, is that correct?
Yeah, I moved
Birmingham?
down south real
Yeah.
fast.
Like how much was this idea of being straightforward and like speaking your mind and fight and the like to move society forward, like a part of that everyday, you know, life?
I mean, my father was on that. My dad was, civil rights journalist, and I don't even know if that's fair to say. He was just a journalist, but he focused on civil rights.
Sure.
Um, he was always talking about real stuff and interviewing politicians, calling bullshit where he saw it. I think I got more of a window into his mind when we would go to the barber shop together when I was little. And in those days, just as a like third or fourth grader, you're just listening to grown men talk about stuff that you don't completely understand.
Yeah.
But you hear it and you're like, oh wow, they do that. Oh, that's what y'all be thinking. Okay, cool. So that was, I'd say that was probably the first influence of giving a damn about things. But I was lucky enough to have a pretty decent enough childhood to where I didn't have to be burdened with a lot of the things that my father was carrying around from the civil rights movement. You knew about racism, you knew about injustice, but also Birmingham is a city that's 75% Black. I lived on the Black side of town. Everything I knew was Black, from the boys' clubs, the librarians, to the Little League, Black church, Black grocery store. So I didn't have the same strife and getting chased home by white boys experience that my father might have had. So in that regard, I think things were a little different. In terms of speaking my mind, I think where my mom probably hated was like somewhere around sixth grade. Like I got whippings for a little while as a kid, but then I think my mom finally realized, oh, well, I'm never going to spank him into whatever. So let's just not do that anymore. And let's just talk. And then that's when I started being able to share my opinions on things. Hey, I understand you feel like this. Let me tell you why this teacher is an asshole, and lay out. And 9 times out of 10, I lost. But
rightfully so, or no, if you look back on it?
Yeah, rightfully so.
Okay.
But to be able to walk into situations where I was allowed to speak my mind, my mom was really integral in making me feel comfortable with being able to say how I felt, no matter what the consequence, no matter if it changes anything. Here is the space for you to share your opinion. And I would say what I had to feel. And sometimes it swayed decisions in the house. Sometimes it didn't. But it gave me the confidence that if my mom will let me say what I'm thinking,
Yeah,
I don't care what anybody else. I'm gonna say what the hell I'm thinking. And so, that probably carried over into adulthood. And then I think once my comedy started to mature in my late 20s, early 30s, that's when it started coming out like that. Everything I'm talking about laid dormant for a long ass time. And then when I graduated from college and started being on the road, then it was like, yeah, you know what I feel? Yeah. And I had a morning show. I was doing morning radio. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to tell y'all what I feel about the city today. Creating also having a show that was a space for other people to speak their mind, the residents of Birmingham and stuff. So, yeah, that's kind of where it came from.
So you mentioned the radio show, and I know that you started in radio even while you were in college, right? Like
Yeah,
at
Florida A&M, yeah.
And so you went to school for broadcast journalism.
Correct.
Was there any influence from your dad being a journalist to want to be in that journalism world?
Subliminally, maybe, but I wanted to be Stuart Scott. My father was so serious and so always focused about life that never really carried over to me because it just seemed too serious. And I wasn't a class clown, but I was a fairly jovial kid. And it seems like the stuff you swimming in, Dad, it's just you're angry all the time. Like you're just riled up all the time. I don't know if I want to exist like that,
Yeah.
so let me figure out another way. I enjoy watching Stuart Scott. Fred Hickman was another guy that I enjoyed, but these were black men who looked like me and talked like me, and they seemed to make talking about sports fun. And that's what we did at school every day. That's what we did at baseball practice every afternoon. So, you know what? I think I'm going to just try to be like Stuart Scott.
So was
And then,
sports journalism kind of what you were thinking, or
no, just journalism for sure. I didn't know where I knew that I wanted to do offbeat, lighter stories. I knew I wanted a twinge of humor. There's a woman that's been at CNN for a while, Jenny Mose, and Jenny had her beat, at least in the late 90s, and even now, was the offbeat, odd stories, the things that were the observations that you didn't necessarily notice about people and things, and then deeper dives into those quirks about people.
mm-hmm.
That's interesting to me.
Yeah.
Now, if I can tie it into sports, cool, but she's funny, but she's curious. And she follows her curiosities independent of the news cycle.
Right.
So
These places, they're evergreen stories, but they're still fascinating no matter what
correct.
they are. Yeah.
So Jenny Moose was like a big influence journalistically in the types of stories that I felt like I wanted to eventually be able to do. Now, of course, the problem is that you're in college, and when you're taking journalism, you're just supposed to cover the hard hitting. You have to learn the basics before you do something that's a deviation like that.
Yeah.
But the idea of wanting to be like my dad, no, I never possessed that thought or that impulse. I'm just someone that eventually matured and morphed into a more humorous version of the values that he represented. And that's just by, community, happenstance, luck. I don't fucking know. But it definitely is something that I just morphed into over time, and then looked up one day and like, damn, I'm him.
But you're
Didn't
not,
realize
right?
it.
Because you're less, you have a bit more of a jovial nature and a more humorous nature to how you approach things.
Yeah, I'm more jovial, but I'm not necessarily probably as deep and as on the government's ass like my pops was.
Mm.
And I leave that to other comedians and activists that's their muscle. For me, I'm trying to give people a different perspective on what is. And then from that, go make your own opinion versus this is what the fuck is going on and this is what y'all need to have your eyes open for. That's never been my approach. But I'm saying that now, but who knows what I'll morph into.
Well, yeah, right.
Because if you asked me 20 years ago, I thought it wouldn't have been this.
Well, if you think about when you're early on, like on the radio, like what it was definitely not politics. It was more humor, right? It was more like weren't you like more in like prank calls and that
Yeah,
kind
it
of
was
stuff?
urban radio. So
Yeah.
we followed pop culture and we did silly jokes in between songs.
Yeah.
And once a week, we would have a pastor on or the mayor would come on. We had one break every week that was like, okay, let's be serious.
Mhm.
We have a lawyer on who will talk to us about law shit. We had a pastor one week. We had asked the pastor, asked the lawyer, asked the mayor. And I think we had like a therapist or like some wild card slot or whatever. And that was like the one carve out where people would call in for like real community issues and things like that. And we would try to help people and find solutions. The 9 o'clock hour, we would connect people with employers who were hiring. If you worked somewhere that was hiring, we'd invite you to call the station so you could just tell people where to come apply for a job.
Uh-huh.
So like there was definitely some level of service to what we were trying to do, but no, my dad was in morning news. He did news and jazz.
Right.
My dad wasn't doing prank calls and joking about LL Cool J getting into a fight with Jamie Foxx on a movie set. That's my lane. Yeah.
So as you get into that, like, I know in college and after college, as you get into radio, what is the drive there? Is that kind of at that point, is that you're thinking like, this is a great career. Like, I mean, morning radio is its own world,
Well, it's 2001, so there's still money in radio and the opportunity for syndication, which is millions and millions of dollars, was still real.
Yeah.
You look at the business model that Tom Joyner put out and that, Howard Stern had put out, Opie and Anthony had put out, in my days, it was Russ Parr as well. Doug Banks, God, I almost forgot the RIP. guys like that, I was like, oh, well, if I can go home and be funny and entertaining on the radio, that'll also help my stand up, because eventually I'll be syndicated. And then when I go to those cities, they'll come see me
Right.
because I've been on the radio. So yeah, that was the ideology behind choosing radio over television and over print, was that radio would give me the most flexibility to travel.
Where does the comedy start in that? Because you're in you're in Florida or Alabama? You're in Florida, right? Doing radio.
Yeah.
And does stand up happen while you're doing like morning radio?
No, stand up happens in '98 while I'm still in
college. Yeah.
I'm in college. I start doing stand up, and at that point, the stand up is running concurrent with my enrollment. I graduate. I can't get an internship in journalism because all I've done is comedy every summer.
Yeah.
But I could get the radio job because I worked out a little internship situation in Tallahassee with the local station where I did morning news for class credit. And that was just for a class credit. Luck of the draw. Those tapes that I did at that time ended up being the tapes that got me hired in Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
And so they needed a comedian co-host, and it was a perfect situation. I'm a comedian who has a degree in journalism, and I have proof that I've already been on the radio.
So that's pretty golden right there. Yeah.
I mean, that's on some universe shit lining up for you type of stuff.
Right.
You know?
And so when you walk into Birmingham doing that, are you doing clubs around there at night, or how does that, like, because I know morning radio is exhausting from an hour standpoint, you know?
If it was within 5 hours of Birmingham, I drove home every night.
Wow.
That was the general protocol for the first 2 years. For the most part, I did not perform more than 5 hours away. But on the weekends, sometimes I could get out of being in studio on a Friday if I pre-recorded my segments and stuff like that. It varied. But the general, also they weren't paying me well early on.
They were not.
We're not.
We're not, yeah.
So, you know what? For as long as I produce the show well, you're okay if I'm not. I was fourth chair on a 4-man show. You're not missing me. For as long as you got the prank call from me, you didn't need anything else.
Yeah.
Everything else was extra gravy. And I made sure that show prep was laid out and printed. And I would stop by the station Friday morning before I hit the road, make sure everything was straight. And then if I had an 8-hour drive, I could make that comfortably instead of getting off air at 10, hitting the road at 11, 8 hours, getting there right damn near at showtime.
Yeah.
God pray I don't hit any traffic in the middle of Ohio on the way to Cleveland. So that was the grind, but you're young. You just don't know. You don't know any better.
What do the sets look like for you and the clubs look like for you at that point? Are they, are you kind of middling, you're headlining? Like what is that?
It's everything. I'm emceeing, and then I work my way up to feature. And then by the time I was starting to headline, like 05, 06, it was like Wednesday through Saturdays. And at that point, I was on my first radio contract. I was under contract at that point.
Yeah.
So there was a few more carve outs for travel, but I still had to do all of my show prep for the week. So that meant if there was a parody song that needed to be done, if there was some current event that I needed to do a talk segment about, we would pre-record that. Goofy NFL picks. All right, you can pre-record that Tuesday after the show for a Friday air.
Mm-hmm.
So, you do things like that. But I just worked. I just drove. I got in the car. I drove. And on the off days, I slept in the car and then drove to the next city. Like, it just never not made sense.
Mm-hmm. When did the prank calls start? 'Cause I mean, I know that turned into albums, like the three albums, I think,
yeah,
right?
we did 3 prank call albums. Good luck finding them now. They're gone. They're stripped off the internet years ago.
For better or worse, you think?
For less of the drama with the label, I was dealing with a label that just, you're not gonna pay me that. Like, I can't tell if you're telling the truth about how much money I'm supposed to. So you know what? Nobody eats. How about that?
Yeah.
We just now we all fucking cam. Like, neither here nor there. But I did the prank calls. The prank calls were essentially part of what I had to do to keep the job.
So the radio station was like, "Hey, Roy, you're now our prank call guy."
You are happy to work here, right? We're happy to have you work here. You can do whatever you want, but we need a prank call every morning at 7:10. Whatever creative things you want to explore. And I wanted to do so many different radio sketches, like the idea of like scripted podcast stories. Tom Joyner was doing that 30 years ago. And I was like, there has to be a way to do a younger version of that type of drama. Can we do something like that? We don't care. Do you have a prank call? So every day you do pranks, and then you start selling the prank call CDs as a way to make a little extra money because the station's not paying you.
Right.
It gives you something to sell after shows on the road. I was fine with it, but it's not if someone missed mentioning that in my obituary, I would not be mad.
Should we not be talking about it?
Nah, but it brought a lot of people joy. A lot of people laughed at that stuff. It put money in my pocket. It kept me afloat at a time where I wasn't making a lot of money. I'm not going to talk bad about that phase of my life, but being known as the prank call guy definitely was something I wanted to make sure did not happen to me.
Well, I mean, obviously you're driving 5 hours, 8 hours, you're getting out of that sphere of the Birmingham radio reach, right? So you can make a name for yourself as a stand-up outside of that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I sold some of the pranks. Part of how I expanded my reach in the clubs was that I sold some of my prank phone calls to other radio stations in markets where I couldn't get booked by the comedy club.
Oh, so you get a name there being like, this is the guy.
Yeah, and then call the club 6 months later. All right, you wouldn't book me before. What about now? And they go, oh, you're in the oh, yeah. If I really nailed it, I would get a spot on the station that the club uses to promote the comedians. Then would deliberately ask for a performance slot, generally 20 to 30 minutes before the comedian is supposed to be on. Mm-hmm. I didn't always have a say in when the prank aired, but if I could, it's like, I know the comedian's on at 7:30. Put my prank call on at 7:10. Because I know that the comedian is in the car with the booker and they're listening to the station as they ride in. And to me, that was my way of auditioning.
That's so smart.
For the club owner and for the headliner. So yeah, you've heard of me. You at least know my name. So some markets it worked, some that didn't. But the prank calls, they definitely helped to extend my reach. And in return, the radio DJs, they got free content to help make your show better. I'm still in touch with a lot of those guys to this day.
Do you now go to those when you're touring? Do you go and do those shows now, or still, or no?
Most of those markets I don't play anymore. Respect with respect.
You know, you got to play places on your way up, and you know, the venues change. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So when does it, like, for you, because you mentioned you got the syndicated show as well. At what point do you say, you know what, like, my career is really on the stand up, like it's no longer syndicated radio?
When I felt confident enough just in stand up. 07, 08. I moved to LA in 07, January of 2007. I was headlining just enough, so it felt like, oh, okay, I think I can do this for a living now and be okay.
And at that point, you know, when you kind of make that move, LA is its own kind of world. Like, had you been going there a lot already? Kind of had your kind of places, your people there, or was it?
I'd probably been going there maybe like once a month for a year before that, to the point where people thought I already lived in LA. Like by design, I set it up. I was like, oh yeah, I live in LA now, and I'll be right back in 3 weeks. I have gigs, but I was still in Birmingham doing mornings. But I kind of primed the pump with LA going back and forth for a year. So that by the time I officially moved, I'd already made the connection. I knew who I needed to know to start the process of like trying to climb that mountain. But that was the first time where I like felt confident enough because my rent went from $575 to I think 1,800.
In LA, 1,800.
Yeah,
That's a bit of a jump.
It was a big jump when you're used to paying $575. And the downside to LA though was that all my money was back east until I started really hitting it off in colleges. But even then, doing colleges, that means you're out of LA.
Right.
And college season is February to April, which at the time, that was pilot season when all the auditions were going out. So I couldn't audition for
The
anything.
whole point of going to LA is a pilot season. And
Correct.
Yeah.
So that part I did wrong. I probably would have been, in hindsight, I should have moved to New York because it's shorter flights to go get my money. And then I can just get better as a stand-up. I didn't really book outside of stand-up gigs. I did not book anything of significance in Los Angeles for the greater part of 6 years.
Really?
No,
Just
nothing that justified me being there. I just bounced around and did sets around town and built friendships, but I could have done all that in New York and been a better comedian. I'd have been way better off, you know.
Yeah.
Mm.
Do you feel like, you've lived in New York now for a little while, like think about the comedy community in New York and the comedy community in LA, and I know it's crossover, obviously a lot of people know each other. What is that community? How does that help you as you kind of become immersed in that world?
I think New York is a series of better accountability partners in terms of just getting better as a stand-up. If you want to be a good comic, go to New York. If you want to be a good entertainer, go to LA. Good actor, good writer, good producer. You want to do all that other shit, go to LA. Make the connects, meet the people who you need to meet. LA, you were always getting tipped off on what the next opportunity was to level up your career. Whereas New York, you come off stage and two solid comics who've watched you do that bit all week will give you a tag or call you out for still doing it after a year and a half. LA is littered with people who haven't changed the syllable of their acting forever because they think tonight's the night that the magic career-changing wizard will be in the crowd and make everything better for your career. Meanwhile, you can be in New York and Christopher Nolan can walk in with Leo and across from them is Gerard Butler. And it's like, whatever, here's the jokes tonight. Whereas if it's LA, people all crowd around to see did he laugh? Did he like me? Why is he here tonight? Is he casting something? No one gives a fuck. Just doing a job.
That's my favorite thing about New York is you can be anyone you are, whoever you are, no one cares.
Whoever you are, no one cares.
Yeah, like it doesn't matter. and you can go to the Comedy Cellar, or you can go to any of the comedy rooms and know you're gonna get a good show, and maybe someone will drop by, maybe they won't, but in the end, you're sitting as close as we are to whoever's there. It doesn't matter.
New York is, you are running with people. And when you're running with people, there's always somebody that's running past you going, come on, keep up. Encouraging, I'm not saying that doesn't exist in LA. I'm just saying I never saw it.
It is more of a literal community of people supporting each other, helping you all get better versus a competition. I mean, there's always a competition, but
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
So what's interesting to me about that is, and I agree with that, by the way. I think that's true, not just in comedy in New York. I mean, I think that's true. Like, as someone who's like lived in the comedy world, lived in the tech world in New York, very similar, very much like everyone want to, get everyone, if you do well, you want the next person to do well. You always want to help the next person.
Yeah.
But obviously, you're not shy to be confident in your comedy. I mean, you entered into the competition of comics and Last Comic Standing.
I did all the competition comedy.
Yeah. Where did that start? Or how did that start?
Showtime at the Apollo 2002 was the first one. Then Star Search 2003.
You did Star Search?
The reboot. There was a reboot of Star Search with Arsenio in 2003. It was around the same, this is the rise of American Idol. And American Idol brought back the resurgence of singing and competition shows.
Yeah.
Apollo, Star Search, Live in Hollywood, which was essentially a West Coast version of the Apollo.
Mhm.
Um,
Are they all those just comedy? Star
well,
Search
Showtime,
wasn't, right?
no, Star Search was like categories.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
in the comedy category, she versus another comedian.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the whole show is a bunch of different genres of entertainment.
Right.
Same game with Showtime at the Apollo. Comedy Central used to have a competition called the Laugh Riots, which I got to the semifinals 3 times, finals once. Then somewhere in there started the run of Last Comic Standing. I had a good run in 2010 where I got to the final, I got third place. But
Who was hosting at that
before
point?
that, the year that I got third place is Craig Robinson.
Okay.
There was an 07 year where I did really well enough. I got to the semis that night. I didn't get to go to LA. And then the first year I didn't got on it. What I eventually learned about competition comedy is that it's just all rooted in you just need to do well and find your audience.
Mhm.
But because of the competitive nature of comedians, it's must destroy, must win, must be best. No one can beat me. And it's like, chill out, bro. It didn't need to be that. It's
Well,
okay.
and the thing I remember watching some of Last Comic Standing. I forget which seasons I watched, but I always felt like the challenge with it was that as you're in a place where you kind of need to be everything to everyone, as opposed to, being able to be your own voice. Not that your own voice can be funny to everyone, but that you're on national television.
Yeah, but you're on a national television show doing specific forms of comedy.
Yeah.
Last Comic's just going to boil competition comedy on a network show. She's going to boil down to which comedian appeals to the most of the masses.
Yeah.
And when you look at some of the past winners, it tracks. And that's not a bad thing. It's just, okay, well, I'm not going to win, but I'm going to do exactly what I do so that the people who like what I do now know I exist. A network person might see me and want to,
Right.
You look at a comedian like Lil Rel Howery. Rel was on my season in 2010. Rel does very specific characters and tells stories. We were never allowed to do a set longer than 2 minutes and 15 seconds.
Can't tell stories and do characters.
You got to set. It takes 2 minutes to set up the character before you drop them into the narrative.
Right.
So but if you look at the arc of his career since then, pretty solid, I'd say. So if you do well enough, long enough in this industry, you'll be fine, and you just can't get upset about. So I just looked at Last Comic Standing as an opportunity to be seen by more people, and the people who like me hopefully would gravitate to me.
And certainly, like, it can work as a springboard. The way American Idol works as a springboard for people who even don't win, they get a lot of people who didn't win have better careers than the winners did,
Yeah, that's definitely the case. I mean, Last Comic it's interesting because there were seasons where they picked comedians to be in the house, to be in the final 10, who were kind of already big dogs in a way. And then sometimes they pick some that weren't. But regardless, if you have an opportunity to find people who like you, as a comedian, that's a win because it's noisy and that's very, very difficult to do. Even more recently with guys like Mikey Winterfield or Preacher Lawson, who are both like beast of regulars on America's Got Talent.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. Even if they hadn't won, that's a good look. So I think that's what you have to be looking out for as a comedian, is playing a long game.
Yeah. Well, for you mentioned how you should have moved to New York instead of LA because of like how
It's
your
the
audience
only
was.
thing in my career I'd change.
But you have done, you have acted, you have had roles on a sitcom,
Yeah.
was that the next step you wanted to take, or was it really just getting your stand-up building bigger and bigger?
No, I moved to LA because I thought it was time to get a sitcom. And then I had a couple meetings with companies and it didn't go anywhere, didn't go to anything, never met a writer, never wrote a show, never sold a script. My buddy Steve Byrne cast me in a sitcom, Sullivan and Son, in 2011, maybe 2010. And that was the thing that slowly,
Because you had a few seasons on that, right?
Yeah, it was 3 seasons.
Yeah,
We did
yeah.
3 seasons. And like, that was that was like my first foray into any regular acting gig ever. Was
Had you done
so
much acting
insane.
before that? I actually didn't look at
No,
that.
not really. I was in a PBS Civil War reenactment. And I don't know how much you count that,
We'll count it for this
you
conversation.
know,
Sure.
but I don't think I'd done any guest star. Like all I'd done was late night.
Yeah.
Conan and Craig Ferguson and Chelsea lately, and
But then you're being yourself.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like I've met people, but am I really killing it? I don't think so.
How did you feel about that sitcom experience? That I hear, I've never had that like 9 to 5 sitcom life, but I understand that like a lot of comedians I've talked to are like, oh, this is great. Like I can,
Yeah, multicam.
yeah, multicam. Yeah.
A single camera show, your ass is working.
Oh yeah.
You on your feet all day. But a multicam is very much like a regular job. You come in, rehearse the script a little bit, go home. Next day, the writers show you a new script based on what you rehearse.
Yep.
Relearn the lines, rehearse it. You do that 3-4 days in a row. 3 days. 4th day, you camera block for the cameraman so they know exactly where to be.
Yeah.
And day 5, you shoot it.
It's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, it's a very solid deal. So, that was cool. The network canceled us, and then that's how I ended up out here on The Daily Show. Because, just opportunities lined up at the same time.
Yeah.
That's
Well, let's talk about The Daily Show.
preparation. I don't fucking know what to call it, but
I wanna get to, actually, before we get to The Daily Show, I want to talk about one other thing about sitcoms, because don't you have a sitcom that you did write?
yeah, I got a couple. Yeah,
In development, for the probation one.
yeah, that one. I had a probation one in development at Comedy Central. I stole some jeans when I was in college, and I had a really good probation officer who was like very integral in like helping me stay like on the straight and narrow. So I'm like, oh, what would recidivism look like if they had more probation officers that followed the fucking rules, but bent them a little bit
Yeah.
because they understand the rules they're hired to enforce are bullshit.
Yeah.
So we did that. That one didn't go. But, since that time, I've sold a couple of sitcom scripts that I've been able to write, some helping other writers, but most of them quarterbacking myself. And that's been dope. That's been very dope to be able to be a part of. And, I have to attribute a lot of that time to the time on Sullivan and Son, because knowing what I know now, Steve Byrne and his producers were very, very kind, because they would let you hang in the writer's room while rewrite was happening. And it's like, damn, in hindsight, I was learning way too much. Like, most actors are not allowed. Like, I didn't say shit, but just be
observing, yeah.
pros, like there's no film school that could give you that information or that to recreate. You can't even simulate it.
Yeah. How is that, if you think about the scripts that you've been writing? Because, I mean, sitcom writing is a very specific format, as is screenplay writing, as is whatever. Like, how have you find adapting to that style as a writer?
I'd say that TV is about the characters and the things they go through. Movies are about the story and how it affects the characters. That's really the only way I can put it. TV is a series of breadcrumbs over which a character can evolve or not evolve, but it's just a character reacting to these things. Whereas in a movie, you have a character and then these things happen to him, and then the character has to change and evolve. TV, your character doesn't have to be different by the end of the episode. If you learned a lesson, cool. If not, cool. But over the arc of it,
which has changed over the course of the years. And the sitcom used to be, the arc of the show was its own little bubble, right?
Correct.
And now we have this like longer storyline, going.
Yeah. You can play. I mean, if you're talking cable comedies, then yeah, it's definitely a different only murders in the building type of thing. Whereas if you look at a show more currently, like say Abbott Elementary, these are teachers figuring out how to deal with the problems that are thrown at them today.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the end of the show, we don't need to know if Quinta Brunson's character is eventually going to be principal, or is that her goal, and has she told the staff that she plans to retire at the end? There's no underlying thing of that nature.
Right.
There's a romance beeline of whether or not you're going to date the other. Like, there's that. But the sense of I'm watching this, understanding that this character is going to be different at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in some TV, the big difference is that maybe the character doesn't change at all. Maybe it's about just telling fun stories.
Sure.
Yeah.
And there's a place for all those things. You know, I mean, it's why we have so many, we have a good amount of animated sitcoms that haven't changed in years. They just have a great 30 minutes or 22 minutes of humor. And
you watch Family Guy, you know what you're going to get.
Yeah, you do.
You know, and I think in that regard for television, for a lot of people, it's comforting.
It's escapism.
Yeah. And so I don't want this guy to change. I don't want this guy to be a different, you know, whatever, you know, like there was, I was reading a book about the history of The Office, and they talked about Steve Carell's exit and the debate around doing a spinoff with Dwight or making Dwight the boss.
Oh yeah.
In the building, and the idea that a lot of people didn't want to see Dwight as the boss because for 130 episodes, he's been this.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I can handle it. Like, so they don't want anything. But if this was a movie about an office, the movie would end with Dwight putting on the finally tying up his tie and then having world's best boss mug.
Yeah,
and
you
he's
can see
making
the
his
ending
first cup
shot,
of coffee.
like tracking, it's pulling out, you know.
He makes his first cup of coffee and black. Like that's, to me, that's the difference between TV and movies.
So you have some scripts in development now, or?
Yeah, there's some stuff that I'm cooking on publicly. I can't say any of it.
Sure, of course.
But yeah, we're writing. I did not jump off the Daily Show into the abyss.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
I'm a fucking father, so I must feed the child. So things must get written.
Of course. Well, let's talk about the Daily Show, because I enjoy the fact that we've kind of taken this journey into what got you there. So the sitcom ends, and what's your state of mind at that point? You know,
shit happens. I didn't care. Like, it sucked, but
that's
idea of bad news being bad, it's just news.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, well, we got canceled. Well, what are we gonna figure out?
You're still doing stand up.
Yeah, never stop stand up. I had a brief thought about going, about moving to New York. Sully ends 2013. All of 2014, I tour and I'm doing stuff on ESPN.
Finally bringing that sports journalism, you know.
So Sports Nation, there's a guy I graduated journalism school with who became a producer at ESPN. And he called me at the top of 2014. He goes, hey, would you ever want to come up here and sit in on one of the, you know, we got this guy, Bomani Jones. I think you two would be fun together. There's also this new lady, Jamel Hill. Maybe y'all would be cool. We were going to put it with this other guy, Mike Smith. And so I started going up to Bristol every other month when I was on the East Coast to do shows. I do well enough at the ESPN properties at Bristol. He reaches out, the producer guy reaches out to the producer for Sports Nation, which shoots in LA. So I became a regular guest on Sports Nation. So all these shows as a comedian, this is in the era where ESPN would just put random comedians on TV. Like, that does not happen now.
Right.
But in those days, yeah, we're going to talk sports. And also joining us is this schmuck who's doing the comedy Chuckle Hut or whatever.
Did you have like a tremendous amount of sports knowledge or I didn't.
I'm a regular sports viewer. I think the job of a comedian on any show like that is to just be a fan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you are a fan though of
yeah, I don't need to know who the fourth quarterback is that they was in the draft in 1995. Like, I don't need to Mel Kiper Jr. Like, I don't need to be a stat nerd. I just need to have a passion about the sports that I'm passionate about. And those are the sports that they'll call you in to have an opinion on. And when you speak, you better be funny. Mm-hmm. So that discipline of, here's the news story. What's the joke that you have that no one else on earth would have about this thing? And that's kind of where that would be the muscle that would become the most used at the Daily Show. But at the time, 2014 was the development.
Were you
of that muscle.
pre-writing these jokes coming into those broadcasts? Or?
Yeah, no one helps you at ESPN. They don't have writers.
They don't have comedy writers? Shocking.
They have producers who will tell you, all right, man, this is the segment. We know these three people's opinion is going to be this. We've already had a prep meeting this morning, so I know how Michelle Beadle and Max Kellerman are going to feel. We know how Marcellus Wiley's going to feel.
Mm-hmm.
So just keep that in mind as you and that's just them kind of soft suggesting, don't make the same point as the other three people, because that's not why you're fucking here.
Yeah.
And that's great producing.
Totally. That's fair. Yeah.
So
that's why panels are good, when you have disagreements and you have some back and forth,
So it taught me, that time at ESPN taught me how to think differently from everybody else and start having predictive ideologies on, okay, well, here's the story. You already know everybody's going to say this or this. What if I say this? Just off the opinion alone, you're going to get a laugh. And around then was the change, and how I saw humor, how I chose to put jokes together. Like that was the beginning of that.
That's something like an important, I think, realization, right? Like, is that conscious, or that you kind of saw a different?
No, it was just a new habit that got results, so I just kept doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I never had to think about humor from a place of not stepping on other people's toes.
Mm-hmm.
So in a lot of cases, my punchlines were obvious and easy. The joke was still funny, but it wasn't unique enough. The ideology wasn't unique enough. So I started enjoying having the most unique take on things. So I just pressed forward with that in my humor. 2015 comes, Jon Stewart leaves. And I get a call from my boy Neil Brennan. Neil Brennan says, talking to Trevor, they're looking for new correspondents. Do you want to put your name in the hat? I go, absolutely. Producers give me a call. Sure enough, first thing they're checking is all of the footage of me on ESPN.
This goes back to your radio days too. Like, you had the footage already.
I had proof.
Yeah.
So I just didn't know that when I was doing the thing that it was preparing me for the next thing. That's why I trust anything that I'm doing now. It's just, okay, there's a reason this is happening.
Yeah.
Don't know why, but I'm going to do it. So yeah, they saw the ESPN stuff, and sports is harder than politics, I would argue, as a comedian.
How come?
Because sports fans, everyone within the ecosystem of sports thinks that they're right. Where in politics, no, in politics, it's understood that I'm right, they're wrong. There's no wrong party in sports. Like I would rather, like, if you ask me, I saw Keegan-Michael Key one time at the airport or some shit, and I told him and his wife, because he hosts the NFL Honors. To me, that's more difficult than the Correspondents' Dinner. To a room full of athletes who have forever been told they are the best. Who are you, stranger, who I don't respect, to make a joke about me? How dare you? Do you know how good I am and how elite I am? How dare you? As politicians, I can go, y'all are stupid. Yeah, we stupid. But y'all not as stupid as them.
Yeah, that's that.
There's someone to hate. There's someone to laugh at. Sports, you don't have that. Also, sports, you cannot talk bad about. There's too many landmines. I can't insult the team. I can't insult the fans. I cannot insult the owners. I cannot insult the players. Now find me a joke that doesn't touch one of those 4 tripwires.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the joke you get to do. And when you get used to dodging those tripwires, it's easy to write politics, because politics allows you to step on landmines.
Right.
It's better that you do piss somebody off, because then that means there's another group of people going, fuck yeah, tell them. That's what you should do.
And the Daily Show also, this is not a knock on sports, but I feel like doing that in a smart way is in politics is hard.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Like,
Correct.
because it's so like there's so many easy jokes to make about either side
Mm-hmm.
every day, but to do that in a way that makes people think, that's where I think that like, your work and the Daily Show's work and John Oliver's work and Seth's work, I think like all get like really, I think I admire them a lot because they're not just making the you're stupid. They're almost like
we're right, they're
yeah,
wrong.
right.
Yeah.
It's almost like if you like, I think I went to J school as well, and like I think about like everything you write had to back up your headline or your nut graph, whatever, right? Like you're always,
Yeah.
and I feel like the smart way of doing that comedically is showing, not telling, right? Like we can say Donald Trump is a buffoon, and people might laugh at that, or use other adjectives that people might laugh at, but to give a whole lot of like just proof that that's true is, I think, more entertaining, but also more education.
Yeah,
You know?
it's more fun. It's more fun. Yeah.
And so going into the Daily Show, how do you approach that? Thinking about the fact that politics might be easier, but there's certainly a variety of ways to approach it.
It was the same as ESPN. Here's the news. What's the weird observation I can make that no one else has made? And then from that, then expand into making the political points or whatever. But first, look at the issue, figure out what could be said about it. With the Daily Show, time there, a lot of it is about, even if it's a tragic issue, you don't joke about the issue. You joke about the causation that led to it, or you joke about the people who are preventing changing policies that could keep that issue from happening again. So that kind of becomes, the game. But, you get lucky because you walk in the building and there's people that have already been doing the job longer than you, and they got you. So I think that's probably the coolest thing about Daily Show, is that I came in and immediately my first field piece was with Jordan Klepper. It was good to sit and watch. I got to say words. I did stuff too.
Right.
But to just be in the mix with him, it's like, oh, okay, I see how this goes. Sit in the notes meeting with Hassan Minhaj, or sit over in the cut with Jessica Williams. These are all the people that were already there when I got there.
And they're brilliant comedians.
So yeah, so they gave me the game, man. And then you just start figuring out how to put your own twist on it.
Well, I was wondering, like, if you think about when you walked in there, you said 2015, right? When you started there, and you think about the 8 years or so that you're there, how does your approach change? Like, how does your interest in stories change?
You get a little more courageous in juggling bigger sticks of dynamite. Here's something that's really not funny. I bet you I can find a joke in that. So you start swinging a little bit more for the fences, and just with the understanding that it's well-intentioned. But, a lot of it just boils down to asking good questions of the subjects. Like to me, that's the real make or break of a correspondent. It's just how much your curiosities help to expose whatever it is the issue is about. I think that's something that Klepper does so amazing.
Are there things that you feel like you wish you had done, things or pieces that you feel like, you could have pushed harder on?
I wouldn't say push harder. It's just Trump was a vacuum. So you have all these other stories you want to do, but you can't, because a fucking vacuum. It's hard to get out the door with other stuff because there's so many other pressing things going on. I came into the game 2015. Next thing you know, Trump wins. There's a Muslim ban, and then there's women wearing pussy hats. Like
that was within 2 months. I think
that was a fast first year. So when you look at my pitch about how predominantly Black colleges are now fielding predominantly white baseball teams, that's not exactly a priority piece. It's an interesting piece about Blacks in baseball, or the lack thereof, etc. But yeah, man, they're putting kids in cages right now. So we kind of need you to go cover that story instead. So it's like,
and find the humor there.
Yeah, and find the humor there, because that's the more pressing matter that people are dealing with. So There are stories that I wish I could have done, but they are all stories that are for a more calmer water, when America has calmer waters.
Hey, who knows when that's going to by the way, I have to say that I can't imagine whether you're working on The Daily Show or any late night show during the Trump era, or even maybe now, that must be just fucking exhausting. Like knowing that every day, like it's like you could start the day with news stories A, B, and C, and by the end of the day, there's 7 more things that happen that are
Yes.
completely bonkers.
It's like, what the fuck else could you do? Yeah, there's days where you think the show is set, then something weird happens at rehearsal,
Mhm.
and you got to cover that. Like, I still follow the news and still think about it in the context of the show. When Nikki Haley stepped out of the presidential race, she did it at 10 o'clock in the morning. I was like, thank God. Good for them. They still have the day
Right.
to write the script.
Yeah.
But if she'd have did it at 3:30, it's like, come on, Nikki, why would you wait that late in the day?
And you must have pre-written jokes for that. I'm sure people have pre-written jokes for
Not
that.
really. You might have pre-written takes and angles. When
Yeah,
she
sure.
drops out,
Yeah.
here are the things.
Yeah.
But to get into the specificity of, she dropped out right after Super Tuesday, but she won Vermont. So yay, cheese. Like whatever, like you can't get that granular. So most of the jokes, if they are in a joke bucket, it's just more broad stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you said, obviously the Daily Show comes to a close for you. You decided to leave in 2023. We've been talking for almost an hour now. So I want to be cautious of your time.
Yeah.
What is next? What are you up to? What can we talk about?
I'm writing TV shows. I'm writing movies. I'm touring, doing my stand-up. I'm trying to figure out what I would do in a non-scripted show capacity.
Mhm.
But I'll be honest, I'm kind of waiting to see how the industry settles a little bit. You know,
From after the strikes and everything? Or?
Yeah, after the strike, there's a lot of mergers. Companies are broke. So a lot of the ideas you had, they may not have the money to execute anymore. So, you know, I don't know.
You have a podcast with our former guest, B.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yes. So B and I have been working on a show called Tribulations that we've been doing. We haven't done a new episode yet, a new live show yet,
Mhm.
but it's been a dope show where we invited a live audience to show up, entertain them with some comedians, but there's QR codes on the table and audience members can submit random shit that they're going through. And then B and the comedians first give terrible solutions. And then we bring B on stage and then she kind of works through it from a more therapeutic point of view.
She is a professional at that side of things. That's true. That does help.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to know when they are. I want to come to one of these shows.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where do you guys do them?
We normally do them at City Winery, but we're still figuring out the system. Me quitting the Daily Show kind of upended a lot of pre-existing plans. So
Sure.
I gotta get my feet under me in other capacities first, because Tribulation was a labor of love, but that wasn't the thing that was like making me all of the money yet.
Oh, sure.
So
Yeah.
that's the thing that like, let's get solid over here. And then we can go back into the garage and tinker with this little live therapy show toy that Daddy's been working on.
Totally get it, man.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on.
I
It's been
appreciate
so
you.
good to meet you.
Good times.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Cheers. And you didn't finish the beer. Look at that.
No.
That's it for this episode of Story in a Bottle. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review for us in the iTunes store or wherever you listen. I'd like to thank our producers at 1459 Production Management and Charming Robots Eric Bowie for his continued production support. And of course, I'd like to thank my guest, Roy Wood Jr., for graciously giving us his time.